Walking, walking with you, walking with you is my prayer. This is a man that I love. I still love him, even though we are not living together or married. And I was supposed to go to the court and go to the police and get him out of my house, have him not have a relationship with our son.
Going into restorative justice, I thought that I would have trouble working with offenders because I thought I would be so focused on the victim that I wouldn't really understand the offender perspective. But that's different when you sit face to face with somebody. I often struggle with this as a facilitator in this process because we get to know the offender really well, and I feel so connected to the offender after meeting with them a couple times that it becomes hard for me to feel like that I'm somehow forcing some accountability.
I was a career criminal. My whole life I've been a criminal. I went into reform school at 15 years old for receiving stolen property. I got out, got into my life of crime, and ended up back in prison for the final time when I was around 26 for a very violent bank robbery, for which I served 25 years in prison for.
Restorative justice is a framework. So restorative justice looks at crime as harms done. It doesn't look at crime the way our criminal justice system does, as breaking a rule. It becomes about relationships. All of the consequences in restorative justice are specific to the people that were affected by whatever the harm was.
For me, it's a safe and sacred space for people to share our stories and learn from one another about what we believe is justice and peace in the world.
But it's not a new, it's a it's the first concept we started with. That was justice. If I stole your goat, and I had to go before the tribal chief, I gotta pay you back 5 goats. No, it was addressed to the victim. It made the victim feel better. That was restorative justice. And someplace along the line, society got away from that concept, and we got a criminal justice system, and we got prisons and all that stuff.
My dad is an American Baptist minister, so I grew up in the church. Ever since I was a young child, I felt like that was what I was going to do.
It was almost 10 years ago that I started as the director at Renewal House, a domestic violence shelter for 5 families or individuals at a time in Mission Hill.
The most common story we hear is that they've experienced abuse and violence throughout the context of their lives. It's not something that has just suddenly happened and they're needing to flee it now. And it's oftentimes not until people have children and recognize that the abuse is hard on their children that they decide to leave. Using circles and restorative justice in the context of the shelter is not generally to work with full families, although it can come up at times, but more as a process of creating community and finding ways to address conflict as it comes up in the context of the shelter. It's become sort of the vessel that holds all of us and helps us process, challenging things that come up all the time. And so much of it is connected to my personal story.
And when I started at Renewal House, I knew my life was changing. It was then that I realized that I myself was in an abusive relationship, in an abusive marriage. My high school friend and I had been married for 8 years, and we had struggled now and then. But after the birth of our son, things got rougher.
The criminal justice system didn't make any sense in terms of trying to help our family figure out how to articulate what had happened.
But it was more than that. It was also this understanding or belief that I couldn't have ambivalence about these feelings. That I couldn't myself be confused about what the right decision was, or how to take care of myself while also being concerned about how to take care of him and how to take care of our son.
You know, the criminal justice system isn't set up to help people heal. I mean, that's not exactly what, maybe that was its original intention, but I don't think that that's where we are now.
I went to court. This white, straight, Protestant, middle-class woman went to court. And I got myself a restraining order, and I felt humiliated through the entire process. How I had to explain everything, how I had to defend everything, and all the while sitting there thinking, I don't know if this is even the right decision for me to be making. If it was a challenge for me, and dehumanizing and humiliating for me, what could it be like for others?
When I went through that process, I feel like after that I was kind of on this quest to find something different, some other way, you know, to help not just myself, but other folks that were saying the same kinds of things. We had several women in the shelter that were asking us if we would be willing to speak with their boyfriend or ex-husband about what was going on, about what shelter life was like, about why they were here. A lot of the questions from the men were about what's happening with my children, giving them just a sense of this is a home, they're very safe, they're doing well. It decreased the amount of ongoing abuse that was happening, emotional and mental, following the, you know, woman and children coming into the shelter. And it was fascinating to me as someone who had really just been working on sort of one side of the relationship to see that the same feelings were prevalent in the men that we were talking with as well. How much shame and insecurity are we all walking around with all the time, you know, and what does that say about, you know, how we build community and connections and how important that is?
It made a lot of sense to me that victims should be at the center of whatever our system is to address crime, because that seems to be like why we even want to address it, is because someone has been harmed. The organization that I joined is called Communities for Restorative Justice, and it's in Concord, Massachusetts. And they do a model where it is a circle. You have the victim and the offender and family members and community stakeholders sit around a circle, and they pass a talking piece, and people discuss like what they experienced in whatever the incident was, and then what they're looking for as a result. At the end, everyone comes together again and discusses each item that was agreed to and whether it's been completed. At the end of that, the offender's made amends with the community and with the victim. We are headed to a local Dunkin' Donuts to meet with the offender and my co-facilitator. And the three of us are going to discuss the opening circle, which happened 2 weeks ago, and the next steps in the process. And that was interesting. She said she felt really drained after the opening circle, and that she actually felt embarrassed because she shared so much. So in the days afterwards, she just felt sort of vulnerable. It's a hard process. I think in a lot of ways it's harder on offenders than the court. In court, you never have to look the victim in the eye. You never have to describe what happened or why you did what you did. You never have to sit down with what you've done and think through each decision that you made going through it. I think it's a lot. I think it does make an offender feel really ashamed, and I don't like bringing anybody to that place. If you were an attorney, would you recommend that your client participate in restorative justice? And what would you need to reassure you that it wouldn't come back and set them up later on for like an unfair outcome in court? I think we as a legal community can put a lot of thought into how we would protect the rights of the accused in a restorative justice setting, because it's not a priority of restorative justice. Restorative justice assumes that the offender is admitting guilt, which is a difficult concept when we've been trained in our criminal justice system. I have a lot of forgiveness, but I'm not the victim. It's not my place to forgive anyone. Like, that's something that is saved. You know, I really do believe that only a victim has the right to forgive somebody for what they've done. I think restorative justice, for many reasons, is an environment that can encourage that kind of forgiveness, but it's not essential. And I think that putting that pressure on victims is not okay. I think that it's too much to ask anyone for, but forgiveness, I think, shows an ability to look at what someone else has experienced and to see them as a human being. And I think that is part of restorative justice, that part of it, that seeing other people as human.
They tell me I'm unique because no one else has my background. It was a brutal existence. It was just undescribable. But I accepted it and I could survive in it. When I reached a point that I knew I was no longer going to do crime and that I was no longer a threat to anyone, that's when it really became difficult doing time. It was probably the last 10 years when I was no longer a criminal. That was the most brutal part. I've read a number of different religious books, and they all seem to have a common theme, was that bad things happen for a good reason. So I kept contemplating this question about what is the purpose of my existence? And I had a lot of trouble finding the purpose. And then it dawned on me that it would justify my whole existence. If I could keep one kid out of prison, one kid from hurting someone, that would make sense to me. That would make me feel good. I ended up getting out of prison after 25 years, and that's when I started getting involved in restorative justice, because that seemed to fit right into how I felt. So I wrote this book for teenagers, a self-help manual, and I got it printed up, and the main thing is that it opens kids up. Because you get some kids that they don't want to talk. You know, it's not like I was someone that graduated from college and read a bunch of books and now I'm doing this restorative justice thing. You know, it's someone that actually walked the streets at night and did all those things that these kids are doing, and most of the time you have success, but every now and then you end up with failure. So that got referred back to the police because there was nothing we could do with it. It couldn't go any further. There's still people in prison that need to be locked up, but that do change. I was one of them. I mean, I needed to be locked up, and I was never going to change, and I didn't care about anyone or anything, and all those emotions, that was me. And I didn't want to hear it. And I changed, so there was hope for everyone.
Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Talk to people you know. Talk to people you don't know. Talk to people you never talk to.
I think some magical thing happens.
Everyone in the circle learns so much about what their life is like and what leads to these choices.
It helps the offender to actually hear everything the victim has to say. And it helps the victim to get it out, just to release how they feel and get it out there.
To